Hey guys, it's Abby with the Bead Place, and today we're going to show you how to make this really fun carousel bracelet. This is made out of paracord, Swarovski pearls, Swarovski crystals, and a button. The first thing you want to do is measure off 2 feet of paracord. This is a lot more than what we need, but paracord frays as we work with it, so you want to make sure you have enough so that it doesn't fray up to the part where we're working. If you look at the example bracelet, you'll notice that it starts with the paracord folded in half, and then we're basically creating little waves that we stitch together, and we sew the beads in between. Now when we get to the button, the shank of the button does not fit over the paracord, so we have a little secret. We attach the button to a jump ring, and then the jump ring can slide over the paracord. You want to cut a length of thread that is about equal to your arms outstretched twice. Use a thread conditioner on it, such as wax or Thread Heaven, just to kind of eliminate the possibility of tangles and to make it a little smoother going through. It also is going to strengthen your thread, but just make sure you're not really adding too much because you don't want to cloud the crystals that you're using. So I'm going to wax this and load my needle. The needle that I'm using is a Big Eye beading needle. It's very flexible and strong, so if you have another needle, you can certainly use that. I just prefer to use this needle. You're going to want to tie a knot at the end of your thread. Tie it so that it's large enough that it won't pull through the paracord. So I'm just doing a series of overhand knots on top of themselves. You can tie whichever knot you feel is going to work. This is just what's easiest for me. So see how I'm kind of building up the knot? You want it to be big enough that it's not going to pull through the plies, or I guess the woven part of the paracord. The knot is going to be hidden on the inside of the bracelet, so we won't worry too much if you have a big clunky knot. It'll be hidden. Pinch together your paracord so that it's folded in half, and the button, you just want to be able to slide it through. What we're going to do, now that we have our thread with a needle on it, we're going to bring the needle through the paracord from the inside. So that's how we're going to hide the knot on the inside. You're just going to bring your needle up through and stab it up through the paracord, just like this. We're pinching it so that it's just at the right spot, and we're going to pull it up so that the knot is hidden right on the inside. Then what we're going to do is sew back down, and we're going to secure this section a good few times, and we want our stitches to be fairly invisible. They need to be wide enough so that they're not going to pull through the paracord, but small enough that you don't see drags of thread across. So after you've done a few, what we're going to do is just check to make sure the button slides through, and it does. So now we'll continue on and just maybe do about 5 or 6 passes back and forth. Okay, so I have sewn together a small little section like this. Now what I'm going to do is pass my needle to right about here so that I can add my first bead. So we're going to travel through the paracord so that the needle comes out right about here. So we'll go up through, and this might take a couple tries to get it centered, but just keep working at it. So you see how I'm going through at an angle like this? And my needle is coming out right there. So pull your thread through. The first bead that we're going to add is a 4mm bicone. So add that to your needle and string it all the way to the end. And we're actually going to kind of place it on the inside so that we know where to put our needle through on the top. So we want our little bumps to be even on both sides, so rather than it being flat like this on the bottom and rounded at the top, this step is important to make sure that we have even bumps. So now that we know where the crystal is sitting, we're going to pass the thread directly up through move it over just slightly, and go back down through the crystal. And then out the bottom, just like that. Pull your thread all the way through. Then we're going to travel through to the next section where we can place the pearl. And so for the first few times that we do this, we're just going to eyeball it for placement. And then once you've done it a few times, it'll be a lot easier to guess where the pearl needs to go. So just poke through. I'll get my fingers out of the way so you can see. Poke through. I might need to go a little farther back. So poke through. Place the pearl. Yeah, that's about a good spot. So pull your thread up through. String your 8mm pearl onto your needle. Double check for placement. And then bring the needle up through. So go through, pull it tight. You want to make sure that there's a little bit of a space between your crystal and your pearl. If they're touching, what can happen as you wear the bracelet, the pearl will spin and the side of the crystal will actually kind of cut into the pearl and make a little bit of a line. So just make sure, if you can, that there's a little bit of a space between. So after we've gone up through, go over just slightly from where your thread is coming out of the top of the paracord and go down and go into the pearl. This is the tricky part. You can kind of spread it apart a little bit to see where the needle is going back through, but you don't want to spread it apart too far. And then go back down and pull everything tight. So now we're going to jump over, add the crystal, and finish out our first section. So you want to keep your spacing as even as possible, but if it's not super even, don't worry about it. No one will ever tell the difference. So you see how my thread is coming out right there? We're going to go up with our needle through the top of the paracord. Hope and pray that we don't get any tangles that result in knots. And then back down through the crystal. This guy's being a little stubborn. There we go, got him on track. So then if your crystal or your beads are sitting at a little bit of an angle, you can kind of correct that with the angle that you reinforce with. So see how this crystal is sitting a little bit at an angle? I'm going to go back down through, and then instead of going at that same angle, I'm going to bring my needle slightly in the opposite angle, and that's going to sit my crystal in the right direction. And it will get a lot easier as our thread gets shorter, but we want to make sure we have enough thread for the entire project from the get-go. It's a little bit, it's not too terrible to add more thread into this project, but if you can work with a longer piece of thread, definitely go for it. If you do break your thread, or if you need to add more thread on, just use the same technique that we did to start the bracelet and just hide it in between the creases. So now that we have one section done, we are going to angle our thread, or angle our needle so that it's coming out right about there. So pass the thread, or pass the needle up through both sections of paracord this time, and we're going to secure it together in that way. So we're going to take the needle and go up and down, up and down, up and down to secure a little section of paracord that's about the same as we did here. So I'm going to do that a few times, and you can kind of correct it. See this section here, it's a little bit wider than it is over here. So how I can correct that is I'll just bring my needle down on this side of the thread pass rather than this side. So just go back and forth until you have even spacing and it starts to look the way you want it to look. So keep your sections fairly neat. You don't want to move over too far whenever we're threading because the thread will be visible, but just kind of make it a section large enough that if you pull the thread tight, it doesn't drop down into the paracord, it doesn't slip through. So keep working like this, and then you'll spread the paracord apart, add crystal, pearl, crystal, and just do more sections like this. So I'm going to keep working like that, and I'll come back to show you how to finish it off. Okay, so I have finished adding the beads to this bracelet, and it goes around my wrist, and there's just enough room for the button. I want to point something out to you though really quickly. You might need a different number of beads depending upon how closely together you put your crystals and your pearls. So these bracelets are going to end up about the same length, yet one has 5 beads and one has 6 beads. So just pay attention to your tension if you have a set number of beads that you want to use. So I have sewn together my last little section. What I'm going to do is grab a jump ring. This is a 5mm inner diameter jump ring. I'm going to use 2 chain nose pliers to open it. Anytime we're opening a jump ring, we want to make sure that we're opening it in this direction and not this direction. That way we can go to close it and it'll close perfectly. So we're going to open it like this. We are going to string it through the shank of our button, and then we are going to string it onto our paracord, pardon me. So then you can go to close it. Now closing it on the paracord is a little tricky, but I do recommend doing it this way rather than closing the jump ring and then sliding it on the end, just because the paracord, as you can see, frays, and it'll be really difficult to get it slid on the end without causing more fraying. So I have the jump ring closed. I'm going to slide it down to where it needs to be. And then what I'm going to do is travel the thread to the opposite side of where the jump ring is. So I'm just going to work through the paracord diagonally, and then I'm going to do another stitch section right here. So I have my needle. I'm just going to go through the paracord and come out somewhere on the other side of the jump ring. This is kind of a tricky part because you have the button in the way, but just be careful. Now what I'm going to do is go up to the other side and just close that section just like it is how we've closed the sections thus far. Oops, I just did a little loop. Let me undo that real quick. Alright, so just stitch it together, and the very beginning and the very end are where you want to really reinforce, because that's what's going to get the most wear. So especially by the button here and that beginning loop, you want to make sure you're going through more than just a few times. So work back and forth, pull it tight, back and forth, pull it tight. So if you're working and you have discovered that your thread becomes tangled or shredded, you can go over that with your thread conditioner or your wax. That's just one tip that I can share with you. I needed to move my needle a couple times, so I made sure to wax over the area where my needle was. It was a little bit frayed and shredded in that area, but waxing it strengthens it and conditions it, so it's going to be smooth. And another thing that you might notice is you'll get a little bit of wax buildup along the outside of the bracelet. If you've over waxed, just kind of scrape that off with your fingernails, or it'll just kind of wear off over time. So now that we have that sewn together, what we're going to do is finish it off just like how we started. So you will bring your needle to the inside. So like this. And then you can go ahead and tie a couple knots, or you can do like one of the knots in sewing where you go through and then you go through the loop. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go into the paracord and make sure you're working on the inside. So go through the paracord, and then before your loop is closed up, you can pass your needle through that loop and pass it through again and then tighten it. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to kind of reinforce again just to kind of give it extra security. So go back up through the paracord, back down again, and then we'll do another one of those knots. So I'm going to do that off camera and I'll show you how to finish it up. Okay, so I have just finished my last knot. What we're going to do is trim the ends. So just take a scissors or a thread cutter and trim flush. Trim the beginning if you haven't done that yet. And now what we're going to do is leave a little bit of a tail and cut with scissors. Anytime I'm leaving a tail that's going to be decorative and kind of show, I kind of stagger the ends, so I'll make one a little shorter than the other. So just take your regular scissors, make sure they're sharp, just leave a little bit, and then cut. Now the length is totally up to you. You can do really long little fringe type deals or not, whatever you want. And then what we're going to do to stop these ends from fraying is we are going to just singe them basically. So I have a lighter here. I'm going to just quickly burn it. Just use all the safety precautions that you would, you know, with common sense. Don't hurt yourself. And just run it through the flame. Run it through the flame. And of course, if you are a child, get an adult to do this for you. There we go. Now, sometimes what I like to do, if it's a little bit white on the end, is I'll take a Sharpie, either in black or just a similar color to the paracord, and just finish it off by coloring the end so it looks nice and matches. And then you're pretty much done. So you have one of these awesome carousel bracelets. So all the materials can be found at beadplace.net. You can purchase the materials and tools in a kit form or individually. If you enjoyed watching this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you have any questions or just want to say hey, leave a comment down below. And please subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks for watching.